Syracuse University proposes Native American-only housing. Yes, that would be segregation. Then says it's all open to students after they are called out for their segregation. Isn't this a textbook example of Syracuse University being a bunch of Indian givers? I'm Dr. Duke. Alex Newman is here, and this is The Dr. Duke Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Dr. Duke Show, the only program that keeps you educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. Our good friend Alex Newman, our international correspondent, is in town and will be filling in for Katie all this week. Welcome, Alex.
Hey, glad to be here. Thanks so much.
All right, before we start, I want to take a moment to encourage you and everyone out there to download our brand new FreedomProject Media app. You get access to hundreds of hours of content and 17 new shows a week, all for free. Plus, I'm working on a new 4-part lecture series set to be released in the coming weeks. Simply search Freedom Project Media on your smart device, and please make sure that you allow notifications free of charge. Okay, our first story takes place in Syracuse University, a college we have called out a lot on the Dr. Duke Show. It's in New York, and it's a lot of liberals, where the campus is now designing housing, at least they were, housing areas based specifically on a student's identity. So Native Americans would have their own little part of the quad, because what we learned from the 1950s and 60s is segregation is a good thing.
It reminds me of George Wallace. Segregation forever.
Right.
True story.
And the so callow, so shallow, so disingenuous are the progressives that if you tried this, if some white person dared to suggest this, it would immediately be branded racist. White people wanting to segregate themselves from others. But when any other group suggests the possibility that we can't stand to be around these white people, we need white free spaces, all of a sudden those same progressives, oh, well, what a fascinating idea. Maybe we need to build Native American housing complexes.
Yeah, we'll have apartheid on university campuses in America. We can have separate development where BIPOCs, which I can't believe I just used that term, BIPOCs,
I know.
Will have segregated housing. Unbelievable.
We could call it the Nelson Mandela Native American Indian complex, right? And so, Sarah, here the facts of the story. Syracuse University has signaled that it will provide housing options based on identity and will create an indigenous learning community, with priority given, quote, to Native students and allies for admission into the community. So would that mean that the French and Indian Wars, if you're a French kid, are you an ally of the Indians?
Sounds like
then?
an ally to me.
Right? And then what does ally mean here? BIPOC is what it means.
You got to be careful when you're an ally, though, because if you go too far into that territory, then you're culturally appropriating. So
right.
It's a real fine line to walk there.
It really is. And of course, forgetting the Constitution, which apparently still matters someplace, people recognized right away that this was a stupid, racist, and illegal thing to do. The university announced in an email in its monthly update on campus commitments toward diversity and inclusion, included were plans to add learning communities or identity-based housing communities to as many residence halls as possible. The university highlighted efforts made toward its goal of hiring 32 clinical counseling staff, bragging that 50% of the current staff already identify as white, while the other 50% identify as a person of color, according to the email. Listed were updates announcing the hiring of an indigenous identifying counselor and the university's plans, I kid you not, to, quote, hire an indigenous healer.
Okay, so we'll have a shaman and
evidently,
some
right?
witch doctor medicine.
I saw the witch doctor. He told me what to say. Here's the funny thing. Can you imagine if you said, we got a lot of white Catholic kids on this campus. We're going to hire a Jesuit mystic to come in here and minister to the kids. That would be a no-go.
It's crazy.
A
crazy
Native
long.
American healer just for Native American kids. And by that argument, you would have to hire a Muslim cleric or an imam for Muslim kids, right?
And I mean, if we're going to be fair here, we need all kinds of different
including
healers.
all whites housing development.
Can you imagine the outcry? I we definitely need different types of pagan witch doctors.
Here's my question to you, Alex. You're a logical guy. I mean, I realize logic is now white supremacy, but let me tease you with a logical puzzle. If White people are the problem, and no minority should be should be forced to live with them. Yet white people living on their own is racism. What do you do?
22. You're stuck between a rock and a hard place.
I know you're stuck between Whitey and Cracker. I mean, what do you do in a situation?
We really
like
need a final solution here.
Yeah, we don't we?
It's terrifying.
Maybe we need camps.
I think we're moving in that direction. So.
Get a train system put together, and we take all the white people somewhere where they can live on their own. And hey, work will set you free.
But see, that would be so racist to have a place where white people were living.
That's the
own.
problem. Even a white concentration camp. I guarantee you, if you rounded up all the white kids at Syracuse, sent them off on trains to do all the horrible things that the Nazis had the Jews doing during World War II, there would be some idiot somewhere who said, see those white people? Even when they're being exterminated, they have privilege. All white people living among white people. That's literally how stupid this whole thing has become.
And unfortunately, this is being paid for. See, if idiots wanted to do this with their own money, it really wouldn't be that big a deal. It wouldn't bother me. If people wanted to be idiotic on their own time and on their own money, it wouldn't bother me. But the fact that they're using our tax money to implement this idiocy, that's where the real issue is.
Well, they asked some kids, and this is a kid I want to meet at Syracuse University. This is Campus Reform did this story originally. His name is Caesar Gray, a senior at Syracuse University. He told Campus Reform, quote, that he is largely opposed to implementing identity-based housing communities. Quote, if white students had been the ones demanding these segregated spaces, nobody would deny the racist motive. On the other hand, a small part of me can't wait to see how this stupid idea backfires later down the road. Caesar, we want to talk to you, Caesar. You are the kind of guy we can get along with, right? Our second story today is like the first story. The theme of today, ladies and gentlemen, is the lunacy of the left reintroducing segregation to American college campuses. The idea that, hey, we spent a civil war, hundreds of years, lots of hatred, lots of vitriol, lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of money trying to overcome a system that was unequal, that was segregated. And what is the response now that we're hearing from the voices of the downtrodden that progressives now control university culture? Hey, let's go back to the Jim Crow era. Let's go back to segregation. Depaul University demands African-American students, the Black Student Union, demands segregated safe spaces. So I got it. Let's build a cafe. Right? A diner, a luncheonette on the campus of Syracuse, and let only white people, no white people, sit at the tables, right? Only blacks. Let's take all the buses on DePaul's campus and put Whitey in the back. Now, again, this is the black student organization on the campus of DePaul, but it's how historically sad and pathetic is it that we've convinced young black kids that white people are so evil. This is DePaul who did this, by the way. The white administration of DePaul have convinced black kids that white people are so evil that to even live in a dorm or live on the same floor with them in a building is a non-safe space.
It really makes you wonder, are there secretly white supremacists and Ku Klux Klan leaders behind this kind of hysteria?
You could have David Duke, the president of DePaul University, and you could not have come up with a better racist argument.
No, really.
No?
I mean, it's incredible. And they know this. They've done the studies. They know that when they hammer this critical race theory stuff, this white privilege stuff into kids in schools, they know that actually causes the children to resent people. And it causes them to hate other people. So, I mean, you really wonder, did a KKK leader come up with this evil plan where they would convince certain gullible BIPOCs to think that hey, white people are so evil we can't be around them. Hey, then we can resegregate everything again. Right. It is bonkers.
So what this shows me is the real human lessons of slavery always give way to cheap politicizing of these issues. According to the story, students at DePaul University in Chicago, Illinois, are demanding segregated safe spaces, and this is ironic. Because if I'm in Chicago, Illinois, like DePaul is, I'm noticing one thing. Every weekend, hundreds and hundreds of blacks are killed by other blacks. Where are the black communities of Chicago demanding segregation from themselves?
That's a very good
That's a
question.
fair question, isn't it? So students at Depaul University in Chicago, Illinois, are demanding segregated safe spaces for black students on and off campus, right? So places that aren't DePaul now will have to have the same problem. And the irony is that, with all due respect, it's not white people who are trying to shoot people in Chicago. The Black Student Union at Depaul University is demanding special accommodations for black students in the wake of the Capitol Hill riot, which they refer to as a display of white power. If that's a display of white power, if that's the power that white people flex in this country, no wonder white people are going away. That was a pretty pathetic attempt. I think 6 months of rioting and looting, 6 months of burning down the church right next to the White House, that's a more insurrection than this one half-assed riot at the Capitol, half of the participants of whom were apparently Antifa members.
And you know what's really ironic, too, is that the people who have convinced so many young, gullible idiots to believe this kind of nonsense are actually the people who were literally, and I mean literally, bombing the Capitol decades ago. People like Bill Ayers, the founder of the Weather Underground terrorist group that literally bombed the Capitol, that literally bombed the Pentagon, that literally bombed the State Department, that literally murdered police officers and then bombed their funerals. They are the same people who are now at the highest levels of academia trying to teach these young, gullible, goober kids who were dumbed down in their elementary schools and then in their government high schools that this is the type of ideology we need to be pursuing.
But when the Weather Underground was doing all that, that wasn't an insurrection.
No, because that was for social justice.
Right. And when Antifa was burning down the church right next to the White House and threatening the White House itself, that wasn't insurrection.
No, absolutely not.
No, and when they were lobbing things over the White House fence and demanding action, they would burn the White House, that wasn't insurrection.
No. Or when they invaded the Capitol here in Wisconsin.
No, that's right.
You know, then they were fighting for something legitimate.
That's not insurrection.
Right.
But insurrection is what happened on January 6th. That's insurrection.
Yeah, you broke a window and you moved a podium.
We were told that they were armed. Turned out that they weren't armed. We were told that 3 or 4 people were killed by rioters. They were not killed by riotors. We were told a cop had his head bashed in by a fire extinguisher. No cop had his head bashed.
Notice they don't talk about that anymore because the whole story blew up.
That's why we have armed Washington, D.C. Because Nancy Pelosi needs you to think that it's going to happen again the minute you let the National Guard go home.
And speaking of the hypocrisy, the Democrats have been telling us for how many years that walls are racist, walls are evil, walls don't work, and now they're doing it from behind massive walls.
With largely white dudes carrying guns, right?
And when we shouldn't have guns and we shouldn't have walls.
Right, and we shouldn't have white cops, right? And that's why that's why they're malfeeding them.
Oh,
they're starving them on the one hand and giving them food poison on the other. Because you remember what Joe Biden said, right? Joe Biden, Plugs Biden. I guess Plugs is not the best. Let's call him Depends Biden now. Back before he had his hair plugs. Depends Biden came out and said what? He said, all the white supremacy in this culture probably comes from retired cops and soldiers. That's his view of the military and the police, right? That once they retire and they have no professional reason for killing minorities, well, then they just, for the hell of it, get together and try to kill people because it's what they do, right? It's what they've been trained. According to this Depaul black group, quote, while the attempted coup was a scary act of white power, the end spring quarter of 2019-20 and the following months after that were horrifying for black students on campus. Why? The statement continued, we were scared for our lives. We saw our friends get beaten and arrested, if not worse, and DePaul's delayed response in contrast to the quickness in which they've replied to this week's events is just another little indicator of how little DePaul cares about the black students.
It's insane. And, you know, I actually read that whole letter, and I realized, man, these guys are worried about white supremacy. They might as well be worried about the boogeyman lurking under their bed. What they really need to be worried about is the substandard disgrace that is inaccurately referred to as an education that would lead somebody to, first of all, believe something so stupid, and second of all, to write a letter so crappy, I would have been embarrassed if my 12-year-old had written it.
They continue, it is imperative that spaces for black students on campus continue to receive the necessary funding and recognition as they provide safe and healing. Maybe we need a black shaman.
Absolutely we need.
Why just Indian shamans? Right? Go maybe to the Ashanti or something and get a really cool African witch doctor.
Now that would be true diversity.
Can we call it witch doctor? Wouldn't that be a... a Wiccan doctor. How about that? Makes it a little better for everybody.
To
the surprise of nobody, Depaul University did not immediately respond to Breitbart's request for comment on whether or not they would provide this. I will simply say this again to wrap up the story. If I'm a black kid in Chicago, I bet you I am way safer on the campus of Depaul than I am anywhere else from violence against black people. By black people.
Yeah, and don't even get me started on the abortion clinics. That is the most dangerous place,
it is for
and yet
black people.
nobody's talking about it.
Our final story of the day, which also deals with universities resegregating, takes us back to the state of New York, where Cornell University, and whenever we mention Cornell, we have to mention that without Cornell University, we wouldn't have modern cabbage, as Dwight Schrute pointed out on The Office.
Is that true?
It is true, apparently true.
Oh, wow.
That justifies the $178,000 million a year it goes there. Cabbage. Next time you eat cabbage or coleslaw, I want you to think of Cornell and the Ivy
I don't
League.
like cabbage. I want my taxes
There
back.
you go. Cornell charges $1,800 for a rock climbing class, but here's the thing. They were only going to limit that class to BIPOC. There we are again, BIPOC.
I can't believe we're using that stupid
You've
term.
even got the title, BIPOC on the Rock. That's what I've named it. Come get together and you can see happy non-white people climbing rocks. You know, one of the things I admire most about black culture is they don't do a lot of stupid things. They don't necessarily spend a lot of time throwing themselves out of airplanes with parachutes for the thrill of it. They don't go hunting for rattlesnakes in the wild. They don't climb rocks. And excuse me, climbing rocks is a stupid thing to do, especially if you're doing it in the wild where there's nothing but sharp rocks at the bottom of where you're climbing, and if you fall, you die. I give African American culture a lot of credit for not doing stupid things like rock climbing like white people do. But because, notice the other side of the story, when you do have a rock climbing class or club at Cornell, it's only white people who show up, right? It's only white people. And that's racist. So now we need to lure, trick, or convince black people to take the same stupid, meaningless risks that white people do, or they're not equal.
And pay $1,800
And pay
for the privilege.
$1,800 for it, exactly.
It's so you couldn't make up this kind of idiocy if you were trying to write a comedy show. People just wouldn't believe that it was that stupid, and yet here we are.
And the class was entitled BIPOC Rock Climbing. They really missed a moment there, BIPOC Rock. In fact, that would be a great Schoolhouse Rock, wouldn't it? Remember the old 70s Schoolhouse Rock cartoons?
I do not.
Oh, that's right. You didn't grow up here. You didn't grow up in America. I know many of you out there in America land will remember the Schoolhouse Rock cartoons. Wouldn't BIPOC Rock be a great one, right, for the new racist left? You could do a whole cartoon around this. Anyway, the class was initially entitled BIPOC Rock Climbing. It was originally restricted to people who identify as Black, Indigenous, Latinx, Asian, or other people of color. That would actually be BILAO, if you wanted to go that way with it. Bi, Indigenous, Latinx, Asian, and other people. And here's the thing that blows me away. Do you really believe for 1 second that you get a bunch of black people, a bunch of Native Americans, a bunch of Latins, and a bunch of Asians, and then people of other people of color? What's left out here, by the way?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Only white.
I'm actually a little bit offended. Like, I would think that I have some color. Am I transparent? Am I translucent?
I mean, they've got it all covered, right? Black, Indigenous, Latin, Asian. The only one
How about
that's missing,
Tongans?
The only one that's missing is white people. And by definition, you don't want them there. So when they say other people of color, what does that mean?
Not Tongans?
I don't know what that means. Aren't they Asian?
Oh, maybe, yeah.
I would think they are Asian.
Pacific Islander.
Name for me a race that is not Black, Native American, Latin, or Asian.
Yeah, Tongan is all I'm coming up with.
I don't get, but they're Asian.
No, maybe they are.
Yeah, that's still considered Asia, right? South Pacific.
Yeah, I guess so.
Would
So
think
it's only
so.
Europeans.
So it doesn't make any sense. But they just so the only race that's allowed that's not listed here is white, but they can't come. It's a problem. And so, of course, what happened is people immediately started to complain, and, of course, Cornell had to back down. The course's original description, noting the class's race-based enrollment restriction, is still visible courtesy of Internet archives. According to the new description posted on Cornell's website, the class will provide, quote, a high degree of individual attention and supportive space where students will discuss BIPOC individuals and groups in rock climbing. So literally, they're not going to do a lot of rock climbing now. They're going to set aside safe spaces where BIPOC people can if there's anything dumber than climbing rocks, it's people who go pay $1,800 a year to spend a lot of time talking about climbing rocks. Literally, right? The literallys are out of control here. They're literally going to now, because they can't prevent white people from coming, what they can do is they can turn it into a referendum on what makes black people, BIPOC people, what makes them feel comfortable when they're climbing rocks. How about this? Not climbing way up on sharp, jagged rocks to begin with. That would be a safe space. A safe space from climbing rocks would be back in the dorm. How about that? It's time for some real education, and today we're looking at Caravaggio's The Death of the Virgin. When he painted The Death of the Virgin, and Mike, throw the picture up here, let the people bask in its beauty. When Caravaggio painted The Death of the Virgin, he had been working in Rome for about 15 years. This painting was commissioned by Lorenzo Cherubini, a papal lawyer for his chapel in the Carmelite Church of Santa Maria della Scala in Trastevere, Rome. The painting could not have been finished before about 1605 or 1606. The depiction of the death of the Virgin caused a contemporary stir and was rejected by the parish that requested it. And as the whole time you've now been watching that image, take a look at the gorgeousness of that image. First of all, these beautiful, beautiful fabrics. Not only are the dress of the people there who mourn the death of the Mother of God, but her own dress is kind of shocking. And it shocked the Carmelites who asked for the picture. You have the Mother of God not deployed in ultramarine blue like we often see her in Renaissance portraiture. She's here in a kind of rather gauche, almost inappropriate red dress. And while everybody mourns her, the fact is that the church rejected this picture because it scandalized them. We know that Caravaggio actually went down to the local morgue and took a corpse home of a woman who had drowned and died that way, and she was bloated from her drowning. He used that actually as the model for the Mother of God. And when you think about the most Mother of God death scenes in Renaissance painting aren't really death scenes. They are scenes where the mother is ascending, right? Particularly in Catholic countries where the Mother of God is assumed into heaven. Whatever death there is before she is assumed up into becoming the Queen of the Angels is almost transcendently simple and beautiful and painless. Here, what Caravaggio shows you for the first time is what real death looks like. And if the Mother of God did indeed die a human death, then that death would be reflected on her body. And Caravaggio dares to show you that. It's a remarkable piece of painting. It is a shockingly honest piece of painting. And it's one, understandably, that the 16th century church couldn't really get its mind around. All right, just a quick reminder to please download our brand new Freedom Project Media app. Simply search Freedom Project in your app store and make sure to allow notifications. And if you're a fan of the media on our shows, please consider a one-time tax-deductible donation to support our Patriot Club. You will become a Pat Riot Club member, and we will send you our signature tumbler. Visit patriotclub.us. That's patriotclub.us. Before we go, we want to take a moment to show some love to our Patriot Club members who've already signed up. Today, we give a shout out to Marilyn from Iberville, Louisiana. Marilyn, thank you so much. Cajun Queens are the best. Thanks for supporting us. And that's the show. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke. He's Alex. Until next time, stay educated, my friends.